What was a red flag that made you stop talking to a person immediately? The things that I had told my friend in confidence were suddenly being brought up, word for word, by my daughter-in-law. I knew then that she was passing on my secrets to other members of my family, destroying my relationships with them. The thing is, she had been divulging her secrets to me long before I brought up what actually were my very real concerns about my grandchildren. Her secrets were nasty, and would have easily damaged her reputation, but I still kept my mouth shut, even after she caused my family and me harm. I had a friend who called me every time she wanted something. I always answer my phone if I know who it is. She hardly ever answers her phone to me, and she might call back a few days later. A mutual friend, Jane, told me that while she was talking to Sarah, I called and Sarah said, "Oh, it's only Lori. Yay, the only Lori who took care of you all summer because you couldn't drive." I picked up groceries, took her to doctor's appointments, changed her bandages, took her meals, etc. At this point I realized she was an ungrateful user. I was also told by Jane that certain things I told Sarah in confidence was told to Jane. I know a lot of things on Sarah I could spread, but I don't because I'm not that kind of person. Jane did defend me and told Sarah that what she was telling her was none of her business. I am done with this relationship and I hope to never see her or speak to her again. When I was at summer camp for 2 weeks with the Army cadets, one kid, who sometimes hung out with our little group of 2 ran up to us one day and said that he needed some backup. Jokingly, as we figured it couldn't be something terrible, so we gathered up and waited for the problem to appear. Unfortunately, the problem turned out to be a group of girls. When they arrived, they stood their ground and simply said, "We told the sergeant what you did, just so you know." Sensing something off, I suggested that the guys and I find somewhere else to be and left the kid to his confrontation, never getting any of the details. A couple of years later and I bump into the same kid at another cadet function. I still had that unsettling feeling in my guy about him, and he could tell something was off. He came to talk to me at one point and asked what the problem was. When I couldn't answer, he simply blurted out, "Come on, man. It's not like I did it to your girlfriend." I walked away and never talked to him again. I was playing in a band and at the hotel I was performing and we were contracted to play a couple of sets for the Saturday afternoon matinee. During the break I sat at a large table with about 20 or so people sitting around it. As the talk went on, people started talking about Hitler and what a good leader he had been, but I thought they were joking and made some comment to that effect and found out quite quickly they weren't joking and were quite serious about their admiration for this worst excuse for a human being that ever lived. I got up and left the bar. What was a red flag that made you stop talking to a person immediately? Someone who was volatile, like if massively overreacting with anger and rage over something small. I once hired someone who had been late twice, but said it was because of traffic. On the third APPT, we discussed me being his first stop of the day to ensure he got there on time. He ended up being 3 hours late. When I had texted him politely, because I still needed him to come at this point, to inquire an ADA, he flipped out and raged at me, ranting I should hire someone else who is more accommodating to my schedule. He then took a screenshot of our texts, which was weird, since I had nothing to hide. It was literally just an ADA inquiry, and sent it to another client, a friend of mine, and continued to rage at her about people putting pressure on him. Never mind that he was the one who set the expectation, and promised me to my face that he would arrive on time. I never responded, and never made another appointment with him again. Volatility and overreacting are major red flags that will keep me from talking to someone. When I was at summer camp for 2 weeks with the Army cadets, one kid, who sometimes hung out with our little group of 2 ran up to us one day and said that he needed some backup. Jokingly, as we figured it couldn't be something terrible, so we gathered up and waited for the problem to appear. Unfortunately, the problem turned out to be a group of girls. When they arrived, they stood their ground and simply said, "We told the sergeant what you did, just so you know." Sensing something off, I suggested that the guys and I find somewhere else to be and left the kid to his confrontation, never getting any of the details. A couple of years later and I bump into the same kid at another cadet function. I still had that unsettling feeling in my guy about him, and he could tell something was off. He came to talk to me at one point and asked what the problem was. When I couldn't answer, he simply blurted out, "Come on, man. It's not like I did it to your girlfriend." I walked away and never talked to him again. When the hair stands up on the back of my neck, I find an excuse to walk away. That reaction are butterflies in my stomach. Not too long ago a man came in looking for a job. I had all kinds of signals going off. He filled out the application and I told him, we wasn't hiring at that time. I got on the internet, type his name, his picture popped up, he'd been arrested several times for domestic violence. I didn't use any of the sites that you pay for background checks. Just Google, pay attention to your body, it tells you when to run. In the 80s I met a man who had been in the army during WW2. One day he said to me, we went over to fight a war. Your guys just went to smoke dope. Having many friends and relatives who had been to Vietnam, including my brother who died from the effects of Agent Orange, I never spoke with him again. There was a crew of men replacing the carpeting in the offices at work. It was a long, narrow hallway in that part of the building and someone in the crew set up a radio and had it blaring. I ended up having to be the one to tell them they couldn't do that during work hours. I talked to the guy who seemed to be the foreman on the job and he seemed pleasant enough about it. He turned off the radio and talked to the others about it. He then came back and talked to me for a few minutes. Just to make conversation I asked him about the quality of the carpeting. He assured me that it was pretty good stuff, even though it was fairly thin. He said that he used the same stuff in his house. I said, oh, really, as I thought it was odd that someone would use commercial carpeting at home. He answered, yeah, I had to use this because my grandson is living with us. He's only 2 years old, and he's blind, so he has to have this kind of carpeting to make it easy to walk. I was taken aback somewhat and said, I'm sorry to hear about his disability. The foreman quickly replied, oh, it's fine. He's a great kid and a lot of fun to be around. Sometimes we move the furniture around just to watch him bumping into things. It's funny as hell seeing him all confused and falling down. I have to say that I've never met anyone else in my life that could entertain themselves by torturing a blind baby.